and this is Monday Musings, a 15-minute spiritual kickstart to the week. I am joined this morning by Rabbi Bradd Boxman of Kol Tikvah in Parkland, Florida. Brad has held positions in Baltimore, Danbury, St. Thomas, and Indianapolis, where we met when you were at Goldman. So that's over 30 years that we have been friends since you were in Indianapolis and I was working there at Goldman Union Camp Institute. Brad is married to Linda, also a good friend for 37 years. And they have three daughters, Ariel, who's a rabbi in Naples, Florida, Talia, who's a pediatric ER nurse, and Ashira, who's studying to become a rabbi and is in her first year at the Hebrew Union College. Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, I should say, right? I don't want anyone to call me out on that. All right, Brad, it's great to have you on the show, as I like to call it. And one of the things that's always struck me about you is that, well, let's start with something fun. You play hockey, which, I'm not really much of a hockey fan, but I do notice that there's a lot of hitting in hockey, and it doesn't seem to me to be something that's, very rabbinic, shall we say.
I've had hockey for it's something I've loved since I'm a kid, and my email address is actually Hockey Rav, which means hockey rabbi. It's been that for many years, and I started playing when I was about 11 years old, 12 years old. And I'm still playing, except with COVID, I've had to kind of stop. But I've been playing consistently for about the last 25 years in a row in the different places I've lived. And it's a great sport because it gets a lot of aggression out. All those congregants I think about, no, I didn't really say that. But it is a very contact, kind of sport, although at my age, we try to avoid contact so I can get up the next morning. So it's, officially no contact, but boys will be boys. And I certainly the next morning have my Tylenol out. Linda knows that what night of the week it is because she always sees the Advil or the Tylenol out. And hockey's a great sport, so I love it.
No, but what do you love about it? First of all, I found it amazing that you're playing hockey in Florida. You find, hockey rinks and hockey leagues wherever you've served as a rabbi. So Florida didn't seem to me a destination for hockey playing.
Well, a great story is that the congregation 13 years ago, I've been here 12 years now, but 13 years ago, when they were interviewing me, they found out and did some research about me as a person, not just as a rabbi, and they found out about my hockey prowess and so forth, and they knew that was important to me. So when they picked me up for an interview, they didn't bring me to the shul, they didn't bring me to a hotel, they brought me to a hockey rink. And they said,
great.
They said, Rabbi, this is just 6 minutes from the synagogue, and it has 3 sheets of ice. It's where the Panthers practice, Florida Panthers. And I'm like sold. I said, where do I sign? And so they understood me as a person, which was kind of nice. And look, it's a fantastic sport. It's fast. It's nonstop. It's something I've been into since a boy, and it's one of those things that lets me be just Brad. When I go on the ice, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a father, I'm not a grandfather, I'm not a husband. I'm just 18 years old in my mind, not my body, but in my mind, I think I'm 18 years old. And it's a great release. And be with guys who have no expectations of me, just hanging out with the guys. It's kind of nice.
Well, I expect that you're going to be able to pass the puck to them. That they
on a good day.
They do have that expectation of you, right?
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Look, I get on the ice with DNH, do no harm, okay, to myself or to the team. If I get off the ice and they didn't score against me and I didn't get hurt, it's a win. I'm also, by the way, the only grandfather on my team and the second oldest guy on the team. So most of the guys I play with, I don't play in an over 50 league. I play in a league with 30s, 40s, 50s, actually some 20s. It's based on skill level. And there's actually a goalie who's 75 years old. 75 years old. He makes the first save, but after that, forget it. If he's down, he doesn't give it up. So if you know how to flip the puck up, you get a goal. But God bless him, 75 years old, he's still playing. I'm open to play as long as I possibly can.
Hey, look, I don't expect that I'm going to ever catch the hockey bug. I have my passions, but I do think it's important that everyone has, whether rabbi or otherwise, has outlets, both in terms of, getting their aggressions out and just having something where they can just be him or herself and not have to worry about, especially for us being, the rabbi. It's good to leave that for a few moments.
Well, one more story, Steve, is that people say, well, did you want to be a hockey player? I said, yeah, my first choice would have been to be a professional hockey player. So it's hockey player or rabbi, there wasn't really a choice, but in my dreams, there was a choice. Okay.
I know.
Hockey player or rabbi. And they said, well, what do they have in common? They're both a glutton for punishment.
So let's talk about being it's how long have you been a grandparent now, a grandfather? That's because this is sort of most of what you talk about.
Yes, it is. It is the greatest thing next to hockey. No, it's actually better than hockey. My eldest grandson is 3 years old. That's Yaakov. And my youngest grandson, his brother is Matan, and he's about 1.5. And the daughters, they're the boys of my daughter Ariel, who lives in Naples. After having 3 girls, it's so nice to have 2 grandsons. There's just things you can do with sons that you just don't do with daughters. Not that I regret my daughters one bit. I love them beyond anything. But with boys, you just get to do different kinds of things, and that's kind of fun. And Yaakov is just fantastic. It goes by Jacob also, but his father is Israeli, from Cholon. And he was named, interestingly enough, after Asher's father, who's still alive, because Asher's father comes from Syria. Actually, he's the last Jew to be saved from Syria. Actually, his father was. But in the Sephardic tradition, as you know, they name after the living. So right. He's named after his grandfather, Yaakov. And so that's kind of cool, too.
So I'd imagine that, there's really no transition. We do want to talk about the shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I'd imagine for you personally I know, and since we've been friends for so long, that having these outlets and having these grandkids you can pick up and hold has been, quite healing, I would imagine. But tell us a little bit about your experience. I mean, you were a rabbi there when this all happened.
Yeah, well, this February will be 3 years. February 14th, Valentine's Day. It was a Valentine's Day massacre. 17 angels, 14 children, 3 teachers. 5 of them were Jewish. 4 of them had connections to Kol Tikvah. 2 of them were members. One of them that I buried was a student of mine for bar mitzvah. I did 2 of the funerals. The most horrific days of my life, as one would imagine. It was an afternoon, and I was actually on my day off. Actually, my daughter Ariel was visiting from Naples, and actually was living in Dallas at the time. She wasn't in Naples, and she was visiting, and got a call that there was something going down at the school, and I need to get to the synagogue as soon as possible. So I got to the synagogue, and then found out that we were in lockdown because the shooter was on the loose, and we are less than a half a mile from the high school. So with a preschool of about 150 kids, all our teachers and students, little kids, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, locked in a closet until it was safe for them to come out. So the trauma.
How long was that?
About 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Well, I don't think I realized that.
Just imagine little kids and their teachers. And we were in lockdown, but we didn't know what was going to happen till they could locate the shooter. So it wasn't just what happened at the school; it's what happened, in our way. Thank God they caught the shooter. I immediately went into a mode of tracking down every one of our kids that went to the school. I was unfortunately in Danbury, Connecticut when 9/11 happened, and I got trained by just on the job training when I recognized that we had a lot of members of the synagogue who worked in Manhattan, and many of them in Lower Manhattan. Right. And we wanted to make sure that, if we could, and so I had that in the back of my mind. So we used all our numbers at a lot of, we had 10 kids in our high school, our Jewish high school at the synagogue. We had all their email addresses, and not email, I mean text addresses and phone numbers. And we just kept a list and kept checking off safe. They were either safe or unknown, or God forbid, injured or worse. And that's what we did. But here's the neat thing that happened, is that because we were only half a mile from the school, the vast majority of the Jewish kids came right to the synagogue. All the other kids went to the close by Walmart, or they went to the CVS or Dunkin' Donuts. They came to the synagogue because they knew that's where they'd be safe. That was their safe place.
They walked to the synagogue, in other words?
They ran to the synagogue. It wasn't safe to walk. And they ran into the synagogue, and we were there to receive them and hug them and hold them and provide them food. And of course, their parents then came there. And
did you get word out to the parents that they were there, or their kids had texted their parents?
Both. Either we said many of the kids are here, or many of the kids texted, because of course they were telling their parents they're okay. And then you waited for the ones you didn't hear from, and you just prayed that they were safe somewhere. And then you find out that they're not. And they were, like I say, 17. And
I don't think I realized that the synagogue had served as a refuge. And that was for hours, I imagine, that you were at refuge.
The shooting happened about 2:37, I think. And then until 10 o'clock at night, we had a vigil service at the synagogue for immediate healing of some sort. And then, of course, people were in shock and awe. And the next day, there was no school, of course, and the synagogue was the center for not just Jews, non-Jews as well, to come and find relief and support. Of course, we had all kinds of social workers and therapists, and that were there to help. And we set up all kinds of opportunities for people to speak and get help right away.
Did the town help you? Or the county help?
Yes, of course. We were inundated with national press, if you remember. First of all,
right
before the shooting, literally, if I told people where you lived in Florida, they'd say, where? They wouldn't know.
Right.
People know Coral Springs. They might know Boca Raton. We are literally the town between those two. And it's a small town. I mean, we're up to about 45,000 now, but at that time probably was even less. So it's not a huge city. And most people don't even know where it is who live in Florida. So when Parkland is splattered all over the screen, no one ever heard of it. And then for 2 years afterwards, when anybody would say that, I'd say, where are you from? I'd say Parkland. So, everybody in the world knew where Parkland is.
Right.
It's the worst school shooting in U.S. history in terms of a massacre. In a small town that you would never expect. I mean, that's the thing. It's just not like, an urban setting. You would think maybe something like that would happen.
Well, this should never. This should never happen. The fact that it happens with some, I hate to say frequency, but one would be too much. But this is not the only instance, obviously. What's go? You were going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the beautiful thing that came out of it that put Parkland on the map, not just the shooting, was that the kids that began the March for Our Lives. They were many of them members of my synagogue who became overnight social activists in the cause of gun safety. And they recognized that only 1% of the shootings that occur are in schools. Right. The vast majority are every single day. And they formed alliances with African-American kids in Washington, Chicago, and a few other places to begin to understand. And if you remember that huge march that took place that we went to, that was all organized by a group of kids in a house in Parkland, where they said, we're not going to let this continue to happen if it happened to us. And you have to remember, this is a very well-heeled community. The school is one of the best in the entire state. And they said, we have to take our privilege and turn it into something more, and recognize that this has to be an effort to unite our country around this law. And guess what? The 2018 elections and even this last election is in part due to those kids, because they got so many people registered to vote around the country of their age, and then set the seeds for those that are coming into being able to vote in the next couple of years. They did an amazing job, and they still are doing an amazing job to bring about gun safety awareness and pass legislation that will help bring about some change. There's still a lot of work to be done. They immediately changed laws in Florida. We went to Tallahassee a week later, and we literally knocked down doors, literally, when they were hiding from us, the Republican, I hate to say, but the Republican legislators that didn't want to be anywhere near us. And we demanded that there be change. And I had an opportunity to sit with the governor of Florida, now the senator of Florida, Rick Scott, in my office. And going back to grandchildren, I began the conversation by saying, Governor, just imagine, God forbid, it was your grandchildren and mine. I know we had 5 grandchildren. In fact, they went to the same preschool where my daughter Ariel is the rabbi in Naples. And I did some research, and I said, let's just take our hats off. You don't be the governor, I won't be the rabbi. Let's just say we're 2 grandfathers sitting here talking to each other. And we began an amazing conversation that went on for about a half hour. My point being, in just saying that to you, is that Parkland, which could have had a stain on its name from this horrific tragedy, turned it into something positive where people would call me up and say, it's really horrible what happened in your city, but we'd like our kids to come and we'd like to move to Parkland because we want to have our kids grow up and be like those kids. That was an amazing thing.
Wow. Wow. I mean, what were some of the specific changes in terms of, gun safety that have come about that you like? What was one of the immediate changes that happened there?
The immediate change that came about with Rick Scott, which is one that you remember, he's a red Republican in a red, pretty red state, and so one of the things we pushed him on is to change the access to an automatic weapon, which, believe it or not, which makes no sense whatsoever. You had to be 21 to get a handgun, but you can get an automatic rifle at 18 in Florida until that law changed. The law changed to make it 21. Now you're 21 to be able to get an automatic rifle. And the one who did the shooting, I think, was just under 21. So that was the idea. That was the major change. There were a few other things.
My personal view of this is I don't understand how. I mean, I'm not much of a gun aficionado, but I'm not at all, actually. So I don't understand how any weapon that's built for the military you should get for shooting. I mean, like it's only for the Army.
Oh, Steve, first of all,
this makes sense to me.
To tell you how ridiculous it is, the Congress passed a law that lasted for 10 years, a ban on assault rifles.
Right.
And for those 10 years, numbers went way down in terms of mass shootings. Because of the gun lobby, they were forced not to renew the ban. It was sunsetted. And now for the last whatever years it's been, 10, 15 years, you now have this available. There makes no sense. In fact, all the police departments are against it because it just makes their job that much harder to have to defend. Other than military and some other things you might be able to think about, it makes no sense for civilians to be able to have an automatic rifle. The answer the governor told me, and this is their lame answer, and I told him to his face, that's a lame answer because I led with this question to the governor in my office. I said, please, with all candor, I'm not trying to corner you, explain to me as like you, not me, like you, I'm like you, a non-gun, aficionado. I said, explain to me why your question. His answer to me was, well, Rabbi, any gun can really be turned into a automatic rifle. I said, that's your best answer? I said, that's why? Because someone can take a gun and repurpose it? Yeah. So why did it make it simpler for people to buy it then?
I don't understand.
Makes no sense.
Don't understand. So, we need to wrap up a little bit. I mean, there has been some obviously positive and meaningful change, and certainly the advocacy, and I think how the students in particular, fired all of us up. I mean, I marched in a sense, because 18-year-olds told me I should march, which is a very powerful thing to think about. It wasn't the leaders leading in a sense. It was our children who were leading us and trying to make this change. We still have a lot more to do. But what else would you? It's almost 3 years later now. So, where is the community?
Before COVID, because COVID's taken over everything, right? So it's a
Yes,
whole world.
absolutely.
But before COVID, people were in one of three places, which made it difficult. For the first year, everybody was on the same page. Everybody was kind of like just trying to figure it out and survive, the pain, the suffering, and the attention and all of that. But after that, people either said, you know what, I'm healthy, I'm okay, I can move on. And then there were people who just can't. And I don't know if you know that we've had several suicides of students who
Yes.
had survivor guilt or lost friends. And so the aftermath is horrific as well. And there are people who still just can't, they never went back to school, they're too afraid. So I've learned a lot about PTSD, and I've learned a lot how you either have an inner core that kind of gives you a ability, which most people do, by the way, to be resilient and find a way, that have the coping mechanisms with help. And then there are those that really don't, and they struggle. And the other thing I learned too is that when you have PTSD, it brings out other traumas, because none of us go through life without other traumas. We all
Right.
have things, and these things trigger other things. And then you can't really tell which is the one that you're dealing with, the trauma that preceded, and then they get all mixed up together. So it's, yeah. So to answer your question, it's hard to get a handle on it now because we're all dealing with a different kind of trauma, right? So.
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties, and perhaps with this, we'll leave it with an open question. One of the challenges that we have during COVID is, you and I are very similar. I mean, we just wrap our arms around someone when they're going through this, and we can't do that. So, like all the sort of impulses that we know have worked for our 30 years, to literally lend a hand, are denied, not just to us, but to everyone. And I do think, loneliness leads to all sorts of other challenges. You focus on your tragedies and you focus on your traumas when you're lonely and when you're not surrounded by people. So our challenge is certainly how we're going to overcome that during these days. God willing, as we were talking before we went live, the vaccine will be coming around soon, so we'll be able to return to our old ways and our healing ways. So Brad, thanks so much for joining us. I'm grateful for our friendship and for you teaching, and for you, by the way, sharing. I know it's a difficult thing to relive, but I'm grateful for your willingness to open up and to share with us. So thank you again.
Thank you, Steve. It's always good to be with you, and can't wait to be with you and your family.
Yeah, and yours as well.